funds and supplies, but you need a place to track your stuff, cause you're so disorganized. You click open the web page, you heard about a critical role, and now you're ready to kick some butt in a mine shaft full of no's. It's D&D, D&D Beyond, yeah, D&D, D&D Beyond. You got your stats, you got your swords, and you got your invisible wall. It's D&D, D&D Beyond.
Hello, everyone. This is Todd Talks, and today we are joined by Nerdarchy Dave and Nerdarchy Ted, and they have a Kickstarter that is going on right now. How are you guys doing?
Excellent. If any better be twins.
So what? First off, like, what made you decide to do a Kickstarter and create what is called out of the box encounters? Like, what was kind of the inspiration to do this?
So, well, we've been creating things online for the past 5 years on our website and on our YouTube channel. And, making D&D content is a passion of ours. And, we always knew we wanted to do a book, right? So we've got a bunch of digital products on our website, but we wanted to do actually a physical book that we could put in the hand of all of our fans and viewers. And surprisingly enough, we are not actually the lead designs on our first book. Our lead designer actually ended up being one of our website writers who's just like week after week would just knock it out of the park with this awesome series called Out of the Box Encounters. And he just had these unique perspectives and takes on encounters where he always takes the perspective of the player into account when designing it. So if you're a new GM, or even if you've been doing it for a little while, players will always do crazy stuff that'll catch you off guard. And Mike Gould, the primary designer, tries to take a lot of that stuff into account. We never intended to make this a product. It was just that he did such a great job. We're like, if we put some stellar art with it and some maps with it, this would be an awesome product to get in the hands of gamers.
Very cool. So, go ahead, Ted. Yeah.
So tossing around this idea for a while, we've, as content creators, we've always got a long list of things that are, somewhere in the stages of development. And, as Dave says, we wanted to put a product forward, and it was like, what do we feel is, the strongest, the most ready to go forward? What has the most use? And, from our experiences of, being on the channel and, being, hardcore gaming enthusiasts for, 20, 30 years, it's something like, there's never enough ready-made, simple product that you can do. Yeah, they put out plenty of, here are full-blown adventures, but to just like, here, you want to throw something in that's ready to go right here, right now for your homebrew game or for, your ready-made game, but they took a different direction, so now you need something to grab, and this wound up being that simple remedy for those problems.
Very cool. And is any particular one of these encounters like kind of your favorite so far? And can you tell me a little bit about it without like spoiling it in its entirety? Like you don't want to give away the book for free, but is there anything that says like this is the one I love?
I'm sure we each have our favorites, and I've talked about this many times. Aces High is my favorite. It's a little bit different. It's designed to be used against players, maybe on a journey, whether it's an airship or maybe really traveling at sea. You could use it some other ways as well. But it's goblins riding giant bats and their bombardiers. And there's a new mechanic that gets introduced is using their grenades that have their own timer, their own initiative order. So, as goblin technology goes, it can be a little random and isn't always exactly precise.
I'm offended. I feel like goblins are always precise. I feel like they get too much flack. I think they're the perfect artificers.
I think that decision is what makes them amazing as artificers. It works the way they
always think of that game Sticks. Always sticks out of my mind. That Goblin Artificer from that. If you ever played Sticks, if you haven't played it, you should, because it is like a fantastic game. How about for you, Ted? What was your favorite adventure?
Well, I mean, Aces High is a standout, for me as well. Names are not, coming to me, but I know there's a handful in there that have interesting takes on monsters or the surprise encounter that you weren't really expecting to see. We have some strange use of mimics, throughout. So that definitely going in that direction. So trying not to spoil too many surprises for those that might actually wind up getting into it, but there's definitely a lot of really great stuff that's there.
What makes a good encounter, do you think? Like a good one-shot adventure?
Engaging your
I think
players, creating tension. Engaging your players and creating tension. That's what makes a good encounter. To start anyway, as a premise. Go ahead, Ted.
How do you do
So
that?
I was going to say
Okay.
options. So when you've got the capability of putting something out there that might be combat, it might be social, or different, as you said earlier, how there's different ways to look at it or different takes on it. I think that really makes it stand out for me.
Okay. And do you have any recommendations for like dungeon masters at home about creating tension right away
yes.
in the game?
Absolutely. One is there has to be stakes involved, and it not necessarily always just like a physical threat to the characters, but something maybe a little bit greater than that. NPCs that are in danger, or maybe the villains, the bad guys, are going to get away with the MacGuffin, where it's not just about killing the monster, but there's an actual problem there that has to be solved, and the players have to overcome it.
How about for you, Ted? What makes you most tense?
So for me, tension can be created just in the description of what's going on. If you focus on what the surrounding area is or what the monster looks like, using some choice adjectives, it can really sell the scene. And realize, okay, all right, this is not just a T-Rex. This is a T-Rex that has hateful eyes and saliva dripping off of it. You can still see the blood stains on its claws and teeth from its last victim. That sets a little bit of fear and worry into the players. The more you get into something like that, and they're going to realize, all right, their life just might be on the line here. Do I have to totally Lord of the Rings this and run, or do I have to use better tactics, or is this something that I can honestly just take using what we normally do?
That's a very important thing. Like I feel like players often forget to run.
Yeah, I played third edition.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Well, you know why? Because third edition, like AD&D, was much different in the way encounters were designed, and the randomness to them. Where in third edition, it became formulaic, so that like the DM had a specific formula to create these encounters for their players, and which then trained the players to understand that they were going to face an encounter that was designed for characters of their level and numbers. Which we've kind of got
drain 1/6 of their resources.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because I do miss AD&D's and first edition punishing. Like you didn't know, like no one knew if anyone was going to survive. Not even the dungeon master, really, because it wasn't even necessarily up to him if he was like going very strictly by rules of encounters and all kinds of stuff. And I do miss that kind of lethality. We certainly don't have that as much now. And if anything, I've been more surprised with how often intelligent characters will defeat a higher CR rated monster.
It's a little more art than science sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like one of my pet peeves is like encounter tables, right? I like random encounter tables to be by kind of like region and to not take into account the party at all, because it's just what lives there, right? It could be a green dragon because it's a forest, or it could just be some kobolds that have a warren, underneath complex of roots from a tree.
Right.
It's just the luck of the draw.
And it doesn't mean that an encounter, with that in mind, like, because we're used to games like Skyrim that scales along with you now and stuff like that. When you look at a tabletop game, it's not necessarily bad that you go into an area where you are clearly outmatched. If you go into an area and it's full of like storm giants or hill giants or dragons, maybe the mission isn't to kill those dragons. Maybe the mission is just not be found and just get through that area.
I feel like OSR and earlier editions of the game were a lot more about like testing your wits as a player,
right,
more often than how powerful your characters were. And I mean that can be done in 5e or any edition. Really, it just requires an agreement amongst the players and the GM and the group to understand what kind of game you're going to be playing.
Right.
For the GM to try and kind of put clues and foreshadowing in there so that the players understand that maybe not every challenge has to be overcome just through violence and combat. They can use the social pillar and the exploration pillars as well, so that they don't have to, like, even in The Hobbit, right?
A very good example of not fighting the enemy.
Outsmarting Smog initially, as opposed to fighting him by doing some clever reconnaissance, sort of.
Yeah.
Much of that was an accident. Like, much of that adventure was an accident, and mainly.
When they let the sun rise over the trolls, that was definitely a planned event. So that was purely an outwitting there.
Yeah, and I prefer encounters like that, because like sometimes combat can get a little too crunchy or like slow the game down, and I love it when players find inventive ways to take care of monsters, as long as those are smart ways, right?
Yeah.
Like exactly. I've definitely run into a lot of players who thought they were like going to sneak into a prison by asking for a tour and got locked up because they thought the guards were that stupid. So I'm like, no, they're not.
They went for the Scooby-Doo solution and it didn't pan out.
Yeah, they're just like shocked everything didn't work out.
I recently ran like a series of one-shots in the UK in a castle at the D&D Castle events, and I ran a couple of the same scenarios, and it's fun because the players will have different solutions. Both groups of players came across the same two-headed, mutated, tentacled T-Rex, but one of them defeated it through combat, and the other ended up turning it into their pet.
Right.
So you just never know what players are going to do, and I think as a GM, to really make encounters really interesting, you should have to be flexible and open to when they come up with those off-the-wall solutions and allow them to go through.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is to have fun, right? Like the point is not to just punish your players. So we've got a few questions from chat. Do either of you have a favorite monster that you don't get to use often enough in adventures or encounters?
So my favorite monster is the Displacer Beast. I don't know why I like it so much. I definitely like felines, but I also like monsters that are weird and obscure and what have you. And then the Displacer Beast has its own fun mechanics as well, with it not being where it looks like it is. So there's like so many different layers to that monster, and I try not to overuse it, so therefore I wind up underusing it, even though it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I can see that. Like sometimes when you're a DM and you have a favorite monster, you're like overly sensitive about using it too much.
I feel like every time we have a monster discussion, like that's my favorite monster. But I have a soft spot and fondness for quicklings and chokers.
Quicklings are very fun. And
they punch way above their weight class.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting about them. I think they're like an immediate kind of threat that like puts the players ill at ease, because they don't have any ability that really kind of matches being a quickling. Like, this thing is just faster than you, nightmarishly faster than you. That's scary.
Something breezes by you and now you're bleeding. It's literally like that. That's what quicklings are like.
Right. And what was the other? Oh, chokers! Yeah, chokers are terrifying.
Oh yeah, they're just so foreign and alien looking. and the way they operate. And again, it's a tiny monster that's just fearsome. Back in third edition, I had an early player death from a choker because they wandered off from the rest of the party, and I don't know if the rest of the party ever found the body or not.
We did not. It was one of those situations where we were in a combat that we were losing, and the player decided, you know what, I'm just going to run. And Dave and I are very, improv GMs, but I think this was back at a time that he planned far more. So the player, split out of the room, went around the corner, and that's where a choker just happened to be. And it reached out and it grabbed him, and we never saw him again.
And so there's no one makes it out of the horror movie, first off.
Yeah, you don't split the party. That's for sure.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, when we were talking about earlier, building tensions, the reason I like the Quickling as a monster, as a threat, is because you could harry the party with them for a long time before they even know what's really going on. It's just like, they're fast enough where they can move in, hit them, and move out. You don't get an attack of opportunity because you generally don't see them. They're not magically invisible, so you can't, it's not like you can just use magic to figure out where they are either. So, so they're just a tough monster.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, quickly, I do have a fond... I wish there was more Feywild creatures, because I think there's more opportunity for that kind of alienness and creepiness and otherworldliness to make you nervous.
If you're willing to go third party, there is a lot of Fey stuff that is right out there.
Yeah, Cobalt Press, Cable Publishing did a whole book that's nothing but Feylands, I think it's called. Nothing but Fey creatures. Travis Hansen did the art in it. It's amazing.
And so in this particular product, how many different encounters have you included that you guys have your Kickstarter up for?
All right, so we started with a book of 30.
Okay.
And we've been steadily unlocking stretch goals, which we're kind of like blown away about how things have progressed so rapidly. And I think we're at 50 encounters now with the unlocked, and there's still more.
50 encounters, and we're close to unlocking the next 5.
Is there a certain point where you have to like make 2 books, depending on like how well this goes?
Well, eventually we will stop. I will say that we're not going to tell people where we're going to stop, but there's definitely been a hard line that's been drawn.
Okay, so I was wondering about that. Eventually, you run out of binding for a book. So
yeah.
What now when you're running yourself one shots, what's an important thing to remember? Like have you ever run one shots that other people have written before? Do you always put your own spin on it? Is there something like do you sometimes use those for inspiration to go into a different direction?
So I'll
yes.
take this one. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was just going to say yes to all of them, really. I don't really run a lot of pre-written material, but the last one I did run as a one-shot, and, I had to chop it up a little bit. And it was actually a much lower level adventure than my players were, so I had to ramp things up. But it was a Christmas-style adventure from Frog God Games. What was the? I can't remember the name of the Orcus Claws. Orcus Claws was the big
terrifying.
Yeah. Although it's not as bad as it sounds, although it was pretty bad, and there was a lot of fun things in that. So, but Ted actually runs a lot more one shots that are published than I do.
So I do every month the material written by RPG Crate over on our channel. And I absolutely always have to go through what, for the most part, is very dungeon crawly, and put my own things onto it. Try to take things that are player driven or character driven for the characters in my game, because it is an ongoing story. And if you don't have the capacity to take someone else's material and modify it for what it is that you're doing, it's not going to be your game. It's not going to be your style, and that's a lot harder to just to go and do. So I'm all for taking what somebody else did and saying, well, all right, this is what's here. How do I do this? And along the same lines, you asked the question about, using somebody else's stuff or inspiration. Nerdarchy has said from pretty much the beginning, steal from everywhere, get inspired from everywhere. It doesn't matter whether I'm just, walking outside, whether I'm watching a movie that has nothing to do with D&D. I'm always looking of how can I use what's here? Is there a description that's being used? Is there a scene that I want to steal from? Or is this, future technology that I'm looking at? Is there a way to have that inspire a D&D game? Can I rewrite that in a way that makes sense, in, Faerun or Eberron or what have you?
Very good. We got another question from chat. So we already talked about like your favorite monsters in combat. Are there any favorite monsters that you enjoy role playing? It's just
Yes.
hard.
All of them for different reasons. Like Gentleman Jack was really fun. It was a fun NPC that I came up with, and we have this city called Outcast in the Underdark, and it's run by some Duergar that have been kicked out of their clan. They're the ones that started the city. So Gentleman Jack is a Grell that wears like a Jeff cap and has a monocle, and he's an information broker and gangster.
Nice.
So
how about for yourself, Ted?
All right, one of the NPCs that wound up actually accompanying the players for a little while in my my last game that I ran was a mimic that wound up shifting into like a dog. Mimics have this unique ability to shape change and be able to look like something specific. And there's not a whole lot of lore and culture and stuff that's out there, and they kind of fall into my second favorite monster because they're just so much fun, and there really is no way to seriously acknowledge that they're there until you touch them. Well, just for bizarre reasons, this one mimic wound up having the capacity to open up and have like a chamber inside it, and that's where one of the players who was kidnapped was actually rescued from. Well, they befriended this mimic, and rather than looking like a treasure chest and was gonna follow them along, it actually spoke. It looked like a dog that was mimicked out of a barrel, but it still had the wrong number of eyes. It still had the obnoxiously large mouth with the long tongue, but it still had the big floppy ears and the big canine feet. And it was just something that the party attached to, I really enjoyed, and it wound up like, okay, this was going to be fun for a little while. So I really enjoyed the interaction with that character, that NPC, for a while.
Very cool. Is it nerve-wracking doing a Kickstarter? To like put so much effort into something and just hold your breath and wait?
Yes and no. I would say yes, it was up until we started, and the community has responded so well, and it's done so well from the beginning. Better than exceeding all of our hopes and dreams. So that really eased it a lot. Like the progress that's been making. We funded in under 30 hours, and it's our first Kickstarter. But I mean, we were really lucky because we have a platform to speak from, and we've made a lot of friends in the industry who've helped us out with promoting the Kickstarter. So I would say it's probably less stressful for us than it has been for some other people, which I really feel for them after especially going through this, because until it's actually funded, you're kind of like on the fence, like, how's this going to work? How's this going to happen? Plus you'd spend so much time like researching Kickstarters beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm a big Kickstarter fan. I've been backing stuff for years on there, and I tell the wife, yeah, it's research for when we eventually do our own, right? So like it's pretty common for me to see what a backer update looks like, to see the progress, to see how things unfold. But I have to say, it was super awesome that we funded in 30 hours. Literally by minutes. It was like, but the idea of having to go in and watch, like, okay, how close are we to the next stretch goal? How what do we have planned for the next? We've put together a really great team on this, that there's a lot of talk that's happening, behind the scenes that nobody ever sees, as we try to see, okay, what are we putting in the docket next, or how are we amending what the Kickstarter page looks like? So if you were there, a week ago at this time, where we, hadn't funded yet, the Kickstarter page was much smaller than it looks now. There wasn't all those stretch goals that was unlocked. There wasn't this cool whole pathway of, what happens next. The cool videos that are on the page to show what other people think about Nerdarchy, that was actually part of, the regular video that's up at the top of the page. So the page itself has grown just based on, our feedback and what's been going on. So there's been definitely a lot of, especially those first few days of waking up in the middle of the night, like wondering, what are we at? Do I need to refresh the page? So definitely sleepless nights, and I completely agree with Dave that, we have been incredibly fortunate to have the reach that we do, and for the people that have decided, what, I want to do a product, and that they don't really generate or create a list first and just decide to launch and then get into it. That's got to be, so much more work than what it is that we have done, and I really do, my heart goes out to them as well.
What we talked about your favorite adventures in this. Are there any adventures, encounters in this that you're the most scared of, that you're not entirely sure you would survive?
I definitely see that there's a couple of them that could go south. There's a procession of a certain kind of monsters of a certain persuasion that I feel like you wouldn't want to run into them at night. And
Right.
It also has its own special setting on a river, so it's kind of cool. But yeah, there's definitely some in there, and it's not all combat too. Like that, there's encounters that happens in a bazaar with a shop of familiars. There is social encounters, there's exploration encounters. It's definitely not just, these are going to all be a bunch of monsters to fight.
Right.
For me,
Go ahead.
For me, the fear would be, if the GM decides, okay, I'm going to turn to one of these higher level encounters, because they are spaced throughout a variety of different levels, and be like, I'm going to throw something that's, out of your weight class, and see how you wind up responding to it. That's going to be the real deciding factor. Obviously, there's times where GMs run something, and if they're not giving you the clues, and you're not picking up on the clues that are
Right.
there, that are really outside of your league, it can very easily go bad and quick.
Is there a monster that is very uncomfortable for you? Be like, there are monsters I hate dealing with because I'm just so scared of them. Like just the base concept. Even if they're not really that much of a threat, there's some that I just like, that's not how I want to go.
Oh yeah, the Vargoyle. I don't even know if I'm saying that.
No one wants to die from the Vargoyle.
Yeah, I use them. Oh my god, they're so gross. And to use them properly, you need to have someone succumb to them in front of your players first, because it's just the most horrific thing. That sickening, describing the sickening pop sound as the head flies off of the body. If you want to gross out your players, that is the way to go. You know what? To the Kickstarter question, I would add one thing. Running the Kickstarter for us has been very much like improv GMing. So it's like Ted said, we made a lot of changes on the fly as we're going, and adapting and adjusting to what was going on.
Very
So
cool.
to answer your question, from my perspective, there's two sides to this. Number one, anything, as Dave says, that's kind of has that lethality to it, that's built in. Those I'm very trepidatious about using, because it honestly could come down to just one die roll or a couple die rolls, and you have a character that dies. And I'm not really of that old school thought where it's the DM versus the players. I am far more into the more current mindset of that cooperative storytelling, and let's have fun. I want my players to feel challenged. I want the threat of death to be there, but I don't want it to be like a constant thing. I'm not a horror guy. From the other side of it, the thing that I find challenging to run, comes from the massive cultures. So like things like giants. I don't understand how giants properly fit into a world. It doesn't make sense to me. Unless they're so few that they really can't threaten human or elven or dwarven society. That why don't they just rule this place? Why isn't everything underneath a giant's thumb? So like they just don't fit in my world. I mean, we use them and they're there, but I have a hard time rationalizing giants.
Intellect devours make me very upset. I think the minute you see one of those suckers.
We just had a run of
devour in a recent game, and it was very, very questioning as to how this was going to wind up going because they were low level.
Oh yeah, especially if you're low level. But it is also like, okay, the table is kind of set when you show one because it's really save or die under the right circumstances, and that's like a rough way to lose a player. So
we had run we had headlined a castle in the UK. So the three of us, me, Ted, and Nerdarchy Doug, ran kind of a connected adventure. And we all used intellect of ours to a certain extent. And when we got to our like final encounter, we took all three tables and put them together and did this like epic encounter against an elder brain that had 8 shield guardians attached to it by chains. But then like we kind of like carved out the front of the shield guardians and put like the peasants and townsfolk they had been interacting with inside of them, just for a little extra horror effect. We had originally thought to, when the shield guardians die, have an intellect devour explode out of their head, but the encounter was already pretty tough, so we're like, nah, I don't think we need to add that in.
Yeah, so, I sometimes want to do the turducken thing a little too often myself, where it's just like, you think that's bad, and now another thing. But I mean, I literally turned the Kraken into a Nilithid, so which is just like more tentacles. It was very upsetting at the time. We got another question from chat for all of us. How would you develop a deadly encounter with Flumps? First off, that sounds terrifying.
It's actually, I find it more gross than terrifying because Flumps
it's gonna be a lot of stink,
basically.
Yeah, you almost need to make a smothering mechanic, right? Like, there's just so many of them.
They're generally a lawful good creature. They feed on the psychic energies, that exist around the Underdark. Well, I would start off by saying, like, all right, it's absorbed so much of this negative energy, that they've gone bad. So they have got the capacity and the intelligence to know what the typical perception is going to be, and they're going to travel around together using that to their advantage to try and steal more energy from the unwitting victims that might be lurking. It's like, oh my god, yay, it's Flumps, we can get some healing, and it completely goes the other way. So you've got that god, I'm totally blanking, you got that reveal. So it's like, okay, they've already come from a hard encounter. They need healing. The Flumps show up and they're like, oh, my GM is being nice, and the colors, shift, and they start, casting, cause wounds, and possibly using that suffocating mechanic. And you can go in a variety of different directions, causing psychic damage and all this other kind of stuff.
Lesser restoration could be blight, something like that. Yeah.
Well, or they could just lead them into harm. Right, like they expect them to be, good and kindly monsters, and they can just lead you into dangerous scenarios. I think we actually did a video on our channel,
like a golem kind of situation, right? Like where they're like, there's this greater creature or an uber flump, like the elder flump, and they just like lead you towards that thing.
We did an evil flump video. I don't remember what it was called or when we did it, but it's on the channel somewheres. I think we did something like they along the lines like they had some kind of psychic disease or madness. So like the idea that is not only have the flumps gone bad, but then it's the moral dilemma of the players. If they discover that it's the sickness that's taking them over, do they eliminate the bad flumps or do they try and cure them and fix them?
Right. Are there any creatures that you like to? Because this is, man, people love owlbears, and they're terrifying. Owlbears are a terrifying creature if you're not on its good side, and I'm always want to just make them encounter an owlbear that will tear them to pieces, just to prove a point. Like everyone's like, "Oh, they're cute. They're gonna be my best friend." I'm like, no.
You just unleash it on a first level party. That'll do the trick.
Yeah.
It's so adorable. Oh my god, see my face.
Scar your adventuring party early, because you don't just like walk up to a black bear and decide you want to be its best friend. Like, because you saw Winnie the Pooh once.
No. Real life bears are frightening and terrifying.
I'm a little curious. Do you have, either of you, a favorite spell that you like to incorporate in adventures sometimes? Or that, not necessarily a favorite spell, but one that you were like very proud with how you kind of used it to create an encounter?
I have one in mind. I want to do a trap with Guiding Bolt, and I want to do the Guiding Bolt Disco Ball of Doom that is going off during the encounter. So not only does it do damage, but then it's granting advantage to the enemies, while the party are fighting them, the monsters.
So a while ago, I ran an encounter with Arachnomancers. My party was going around the Underdark, and they happened to come across, some drow. There was a Drider. There was, a Drider that was using magic. So I wound up taking, a lot of the spells that they were using, and I modified them so that it cast the spell as you would expect, but then as an added effect of what was there, it dropped little tiny spiders that would then, last. So I had my spider bolt and, my spider missile. So it was literally, fireball, magic missile, and a couple others that wound up, doing damage less than what the other spell did, but it conjured spiders into existence that was there. So they would die pretty easily if you're using AoE on them, but it was also generating attack. So I think, for a encounter, I thought that one, I was really proud of how that one came out. Now, as player-driven spells, I don't think those things would wind up working if I would give it to the player, but we did modify those concepts and create some Arachnomancer spells that we had wound up doing. I think we gave it away on our Patreon rewards one month.
So you've had like a lot of people backing you up and backing this Kickstarter. One person in particular, Matt Mercer, actually wrote a foreword for the book. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true. We had asked him. Matter of fact, we'd offered him money because that feels like the best way to get things done. Now, because his time is valuable and he deserves it. And we had offered him money to do it, and he had turned us down on the money part, but said, "Here's a forward. You guys have done a lot for the community. I appreciate it. Let me just donate this to you guys." And that was pretty amazing. That I was reading the email when it came in, and I had my phone with me, and I was in bed, and my wife looks at me. She's like, "Do you need to be left alone with your phone for a moment, or because it was really emotional, and it was just awesome."
the words he said, and forgive me, I don't remember exactly what amount he wrote on the channel, so I don't want to give away too much, but it was like jaw dropping and emotional to read the words that he wrote about the book and about us. It was really awesome. And we've had the pleasure of actually, meeting Matt when we went out to Geek and Sundry, almost 2 years ago at this point in time. So it was really cool to, get to meet him and, talk to him.
Very cool. Yeah. And we have a portion of it in the video and on the Kickstarter page itself, but it's actually much longer than that. So
what has this been like being part of the D&D community and you've been doing Nerdarchy for 5 years now? It has to be kind of validating to see this much outpouring of support after all that work.
It is. And like there's definitely other channels out there that are bigger than us and grew much faster. We've been kind of very slow and steady from the beginning. And when we started, there wasn't really much to look at as far as to say, like, this is how you do a D&D channel. There was a couple people in the community.
Yeah, there was no rules to how you do that.
Yeah, and it's like far and few between, and there was only 2 big channels at the time, and I use the word big loosely compared to now. Like 20,000, 30,000 subscribers was gigantic back then. Noah Atweiler, Counter Monkey Spoonie was one we looked at, and then Andrew Armstrong, Dawn of Forge Cast were the 2 that we found really early on. And it was finding those 2 that led us to do it, because we were talking about doing it, but we didn't really know if this was a thing and if people would care or want to watch us talk about D&D. And apparently they do, because now there's a bunch of successful channels that are doing amazing things out there.
So for me, I would say, the responses from people are what really makes this worthwhile. And I don't want to toot our own horn and any of that kind of stuff. But, when we've gotten letters or emails or what have you from fans who are like, look, Nerdarchy has changed my life drastically. I was in a bad place, this happened, that happened, and then I found you guys. And I mean, this has happened, so many times. It's just uplifting, and it really makes doing what we do worthwhile for us to be able to inspire others to become DMs or GMs when, they didn't really have the courage to do so before, to step up and not go down the rabbit hole, into negativity, to, pick up their dice again and continue playing after not having done so for 10, 15 years. It's great. I've had the pleasure of meeting a handful of people who have said, who have literally said, you guys have made a massive impact on my life, and I want to thank you. I want to give back, and that makes it so much easier to every week, sit down and figure out what video we're doing next, because you never know, how this is going to impact somebody else and how much you're going to change somebody else's life.
Yeah,
it's humbling.
And so this particular product that's on Kickstarter right now, it's 5th edition completely compatible with 5th edition D&D. How can people find the Kickstarter? I believe we have people in chat right now putting the links up as well.
Yeah, the link's been going up in chat, but pretty much if you Google Nerdarchy and Kickstarter, I'm fairly certain it'll come up. If you Google Nerdarchy, you'll get all kinds of stuff for us. And there's links back to it on, our Facebook, our Twitter, our YouTube, our website.
How many more days do you have left?
Oh, we had a bunch, actually. I mean,
a little over 3 weeks left.
Looking like you have 26 days to go.
Yeah,
and you've already been funded.
Is when it ends. So we've got some time, and we've got some amazing things that are planned for those stretch goals that have not been talked about yet.
Okay, yeah, I'm very curious. What are some of the stretch goals that people can get in on?
So right now, all of the stretch goals have been additional art and additional encounters and just making the book better. But we do have some other ones planned that we're not going to talk about yet. One of those stretch goals that we were planning has not been done anywhere else yet. to my knowledge, and it's going to be a first for Kickstarters and in the D&D niche. And someone actually asked about it in the comments in the chat a while ago. So there's the biggest clue I'm going to give. We're really excited about that one.
All right, and then about what's the estimation once the official book comes out? Is there going to be a PDF version of the book as well, or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we're doing a PDF. We're doing a PDF. We're doing a hardback book. We've partnered with Arknight flat plastic minis and maps, and there are levels where they can get all the clear plastic pawns as well as maps, so they have everything they can put right on their table to run the encounters with.
Very cool. And who's they're not really a publisher, but who's basically helping you make the book, like actually like a physical book? Like I've always been curious how that works.
So we have a couple of players that we're shopping, and that's kind of to be determined based on how many print books are actually
right. Yeah, that definitely affects cost. Yeah.
When
that's
we started,
stuff nobody cares about.
Yeah, when we started, it was print on demand, but now we've got enough books that we can actually do print runs, which will make it so much better. You had asked a question. Oh, I think you're asking about delivery, and
right.
we are planning a year. We think we can do it much sooner than that, but because it's our first Kickstarter, we want to give ourselves plenty of time.
No, always assume that your budget is twice as much at least than you think that it should be, and give yourself maybe 3 times as much time is the general lesson from
so our objective is we want to over deliver. So this way, if we undersell some things and we produce and we can over deliver on it, that'll make us more than happy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you, Nerdarchist Dave, Nerdarchist Ted. Thank you so much for being on Todd Talks. Be sure to check out their Kickstarter for Out of the Box Encounters. That's out. Well, it's not out right now, but the Kickstarter is happening right now. And thank you so much for being on the show and giving some of your dungeon mastering wisdom.
Thanks for having us on. It was a blast.
It was an honor. Thank you.